Hey guys, and welcome back to Tinu Talks, where we talk all things real estate, remote real estate, property, God, and life, and all of the above. Today, we are going to kick off with talking about what is rent to rent HMO. So if I recap from my previous video where I talked about rent to rent service accommodation, I started that video with a definition of what rent to rent is, and I'm going to give another definition. Actually, whilst we're here, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the nails have changed. I had a very nice French tip. Now I've gone for bright pink. That's irrelevant, but you know what? It's Tinu Talks, and Tinu talks about absolutely everything. Okay, awesome. So in terms of what rent to rent is, I wanted to just give like another definition. For those of you guys who are just watching this video, my recommendation would be to watch the previous video, which is about rent to rent service accommodation. So you have all understandings of the different types of rent to rent. Okay, so rent to rent is where you are renting a property from a landlord with the intention of re-renting it out. So this is again business's oldest concept, which is you get something for a lower price, put it up at a higher price, and you make a profit in the difference between what you're purchasing it for from the lower price and then putting it up for at the higher price. Now, rent to rent is slightly different because it's to do with renting. You are renting a property from a landlord with the intention of re-renting it out in order to get a profit. So what is rent to rent HMO? Now, before I can explain what rent to rent HMO is, I need to first explain to you guys what a HMO is in the first place. So HMO stands for House of Multiple Occupation. So if you're writing notes, which you should be, please write this down. It stands for House of Multiple Occupation. And literally, just as the name suggests, it is a house with multiple occupants inside it. Now, a HMO is more kind of commonly known as a house share. So for those of you guys that stayed in university, in the UK specifically, typically, in your second year, you'll stay in second and third year, you'll stay in a student house. So you might live with friends. All of you guys will basically, have the house to yourself, but you have your own room. So let's just say there's 4 rooms, room A, B, C, just whatever, and D, let's just say. So you guys all have your own separate room, but you share common facilities such as the kitchen and occasionally bathrooms, unless you've got an ensuite. Ensuite just means you got your own bathroom. So that's a HMO. It's simply a house share. You all have your own room, your own privacy of your own room, but you share common facilities with other tenants in the house, such as the kitchen and occasionally bathrooms. Now, why on earth do people stay in them, and who typically stays in HMOs? So like I mentioned, university students. Why? Because university students primarily live off of Student Finance England, which, as nice as it was when it came, it went just as fast as it came, mainly on rent. So it's not a lot of money to be able to have like your own nice high-rise apartment. So university students typically will live in HMOs whilst they are in university. Okay, so that is part of what they live in. I lived in one in my second year, and not my third year, but my second year I did, and I quite liked it. I went to University of Warwick, so I stayed in an area called Canley, which is in CV4. The University of Warwick itself is also in CV4, so I was a nice walkable distance away from my uni, okay? So I hope that explains what HMO is, or a house share. Now, who else also lives in HMOs? So if you look on a website called Spare Room, and I'm going to just attach the logo of Spare Room here. If you look at a website called Spare Room, they will have lots of individual rooms, hence the term spare room, a spare room available for you to be able to live in. And actually that's where I found my one for second year. It's not actually just for university students alone, it is also for working professionals, which is really cool. So maybe people who have a job that maybe doesn't pay like super high, but they still feel like they're in a position where they want to move out. They might be happy enough to live in a HMO or a house share with, other tenants. They have their own room, but they share common facilities like the kitchen. I feel like typically there's a wide range of different working professionals who do this. Like I've got, family members who, have their, after they graduated uni, the same friends that they, did their student halls with, they decided, actually, you know what, I like you guys, and we're going to live together again. And so they'll just get out a same house, but instead of saying I'm a student, it's I'm, a working professional, this is what I do. Now, another really cool thing about HMOs or house shares is that you have your bills included in the rent. And that is why so many people are interested in living in HMOs, because in 2023, there was a massive cost of living crisis, meaning that the price of everything went all the way significantly up, which meant that what someone used to be able to afford as a whole house to themselves, they were no longer able to afford it for that price. Okay, so HMOs, you get your bills included. So when you pay your rent, which is very cheap, by the way, so something like £500 a month, anywhere between maybe £450 a month to maybe £1,000 a month if it's central London. And that does typically include your bills. So, you know, it's a one-stop payment every single month that covers rent and bills. I personally think it's a great idea, very cost effective and a lot more friendly and sustainable, because again, you're living with other people as opposed to if you were living by yourself, like you don't really know, it's literally just you. And yeah, I think HMOs are a great idea. I had a great time in the HMO, like even things like, guys, my shower isn't working, because I had an ensuite, like my shower is not working, is yours? No, we have a heating issue. We can all come together, call the landlord and be like, what is this? So I felt a lot less alone in that. So I really enjoyed staying in a HMO in my second year of uni. But yeah, that's a HMO. Really long story short, that's like what it is. You probably stayed in one. If you've stayed in a HMO before, feel free to comment under this video saying, hey, I stayed in a HMO before, I didn't know it was called that, but that's what it is, okay? So that's what HMO is. Now, rent to rent. How are people making money from people actually living in HMOs? Now, this is that story, and that's what I'm about to tell you. So HMOs, how are people making money from it? So if you remember what I was saying about rent to rent, that is where you are renting a house from a landlord and re-renting it out. What people are doing with rent to rent HMO is that they are renting an entire property from a landlord and then re-renting it out. But instead of renting out the whole house again, they will rent out each room. Hypothetical example, let's just say, and this is a property that I've worked on before, a landlord has a 4-bedroom, all-en-suite property in Coventry city centre, okay? So let's say it's 4 bedrooms, all en suite. The landlord wants a rent of £1,500 every single month. So every single month, the landlord wants £1,500, okay? However, you know, the person who's doing rent to rent has looked on spare room and said, okay, cool. I can see that properties in this area in Coventry with en suite are going for £650 per room. And there's 4 rooms. So if they do rent to rent, it's £650 multiplied by the 4 rooms, which is £2,600, minus the rent of £1,500 that they owe to the landlord is £1,100. I believe, if I'm incorrect, you guys can do the maths as we're following. But with the bills, when you're figuring out how much you're going to have to pay as a rent to rent person for the bills, it is roughly calculated as £100 per person per room. So that's everyone's equal share of electric, gas, water, all of the stuff. It kind of comes as around £100 per person per room. So there's 4 rooms, £100 multiplied by 4 is £400. So 1,100 minus the £400 is, give or take, I might get this so wrong. I know it. Let's do mental maths. 1,100 minus the 100 is 1,000, and then minus the other 300 is 700. Cool, got there. I'm telling you, I've got into property and like, I'm so bad at maths. I literally just passed. But anyway, £700 profit, give or take, okay, from literally just controlling an asset that they don't own. They are renting it and re-renting it out. Now, I can only speak about my personal opinion. This is Tinu Talk, so Tinu can talk about her opinion. At this moment in time, I personally think that that method is a little bit, in my opinion, better than actually purchasing a house, because from the landlords who I've spoken to, they said that even making £700 profit on a property that they bought for, you know, typically when you buy a house in the UK, you're putting at least £20,000 cash down, like at least, but that's for the deposit, the stamp duty, the legals, like, you know, there's even taxes that you need to pay. Like, there's quite a lot that is involved in that for them to only be making like £700 or less, whereas someone has literally paid £1,500 rent, £1,500 deposit, and is making the same amount. Like, guys, work smart, work hard at working smart. That's my thing, and this is why I'm really a massive fan of rent to rent, because it gives people so many opportunities. But very long story short, that is how it works. So they will rent an entire house from the landlord, and then they will just rent out each room, and they will collect profit in the difference between what they are getting per person per room on a monthly basis and how much they have to pay to the landlord in rent and bills. So that's a very basic version of how rent to rent HMO works. Now, where is your risk appetite? Okay, if you are going to be doing rent to rent HMO, you are someone who probably has a medium/low risk appetite, because one of the pros of this business model is that you know how much money is coming in every single month. Each individual tenant who's renting out a room is paying you a set amount of rent each month, and then when it all tallies up, you know that you're making £700 profit pretty much every single month. Whereas service accommodation, which we talked about in the previous video, is absolutely fantastic, but you don't necessarily know exactly how much you're going to make every single month. It can vary. You might have a great month where you made like 5k profit, just hypothetically, let's say, but then you might have another month where you literally made like, you broke even, so you made as much as you put in, you know, just about enough to cover the rent to the landlord and all of the stuff. That's literally all. So it's one of those things there. It's literally one of those things. But yeah, it just depends on where you sit for your risk appetite. Now, there is one thing I must mention to you. I usually go over this in my in-depth training, but I love you guys very much, and so I thought I would share. One thing about HMO is that it has to be HMO licensed. So the council would have had to approve that this property is going to be allowed as a HMO, just because the area can get quite congested and like there are just too many houses that are like house shares, and so when like families or other people are looking to rent, like there's just not enough like housing for them. So there's a thing called a HMO register. You can type in, for example, HMO register Northampton, for example, on Google, and it will literally come up with, there's a document that you can find all of the houses in Northampton that are like legally registered as a HMO, meaning that, yeah, this house can be rented out in that format. So that is one thing you need to consider. It must be HMO licensed. It must be approved to be able to be used as a HMO. Okay, so that's one thing to notice. Now, another thing, where is a good area to invest in rent-to-rent HMO? Now, whilst I can't offer financial advice, I can kind of share experience and also what I think. Now, a good kind of place for it is mostly university towns. That's because you've got an influx of university students who, you know, are realistically going to be renting out the rooms in the academic year. You want to start advertising it from around June-ish or slightly before, so that people can come and view, and then by the time September wraps around, they're ready to kind of, you know, book on for their student accommodation basically, and they will typically stay for around 9 months. So the university term is from September until around June each year, so 9 months is you know, for rent-to-rent HMO in that way, and then the other months, like, you know, you can find some other working professionals. It just depends on how you want to do it, but it's a pretty good stable-ish business model, and it's also very scalable because you can get multiple rent-to-rent HMOs, and then you can eventually replace your 9 to 5 income. So if you're making £700 profit per unit, if you take on 2 units, that's 1.4. If you take on 3 units, that's 2.1. Like, and 2.1, you know, is roughly how much people take home anyway. So if you can keep scaling that up, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, so areas that I think are quite good, in my opinion, Coventry, and I'm going to say just like 2 areas, and then you guys can kind of, I'll give you the blueprint of how I kind of find these areas. It's because they've got 2 universities or more, so there's more than 2 universities in the given area. So let's just say Coventry has Coventry University and University of Warwick. So if Warwick students don't want it, Coventry students might. Nottingham, great area as well. You've got Nottingham Trent University and University of Nottingham, so same concept. And Birmingham is really good because there's like 4 universities. There's Aston University, Birmingham City University, University of Birmingham, and there's another one that is not as well known, but again, multiple students. And they also have like undergraduate law program university as well, University of Law. So there's lots of different ones. So wherever you can have multiple universities. Now, in terms of working professionals, anywhere where there's actually a lot of factories, believe it or not. So people who do like Amazon delivery driving or Amazon warehouse work will typically be open to staying in a rent-to-rent HMO, just because, again, it's a lot more cost effective, and like the type of work that they do, they might not necessarily make like, oh, like, I don't know, 5k a month or whatever. They might do, actually, they might, but it's just a lot easier to have something where, you know, you're paying a one-stop price for the whole thing. So I hope that this video has helped enlighten your understanding of rent-to-rent HMO. I am going to be filming the next video about rent-to-rent. I might talk about social housing, but it's the one that I less well versed in. I know a bit about it, but a lot more less well versed compared to HMO and service accommodation. So I might jump straight into just talking about property deal sourcing, how that works, and how it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, amazing guys. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you took some notes. And yeah, my aim is to just make property super simple and super understandable for everyone. Now, after listening to this, if you want to be involved in the in-depth training program where I actually teach rent-to-rent deal sourcing, please comment deal sourcing, or actually ideally, if you go onto my channel, I've linked my Instagram, which is kingdom.rose_developments. That's kingdom.rose_developments. Drop me a message saying, hey Tinu, or what's your YouTube channel? And I'm quite interested in learning a little bit more about deal sourcing. Deal sourcing is how you get into property without having to pay any rent, any bills, any mortgage, any monthly payments. That's in my opinion, the most simple strategy to get into property, because with rent and HMO it's great, but of course you have to have some money up front. But we will talk about that on the next video. I hope this has helped. Until the next time, guys.